Hi everyone, I'm Debbie. I'm the Natural Flood Management Officer for the Don Catchment Rivers Trust. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the Trust, my role, how it came about and what we've been up to since I've been in post. So this is the Don Catchment. You can see it extends all the way from Chesterfield in the south here, all the way through to Goole in the north. Covers areas of North East Derbyshire and South Yorkshire for the main part, with the main river networks being the Don, the Dearne and the Rother. So the Trust has been working in various parts of the catchment now for over 10 years. We're a fairly small rivers trust with 7 members of staff at the moment, though we will be recruiting for a few more soon, which is really exciting. We tend to be project funded for the most part, so the majority of the team's time is currently funded through a heritage lottery grant called Hidden Heritage Secret Streams, which is focused on the Upper Rother. So that's this paler green area at the bottom of the map here. With the aim of restoring Chesterfield's rivers and helping local communities to rediscover, reconnect and celebrate their rivers. Working in the Upper Rother catchment also presented other opportunities though. So obviously, this is why we're all here. We know that there have been increased frequency and intensity of storm events that we're experiencing in the UK now, the resulting floods obviously affecting so many people. The Don catchment is no different. So areas within the Don have been particularly badly affected in 2007, for example, and again in 2019. And Chesterfield was no exception to this. So as the lottery project was coming into fruition, DCRT, before I was part of the team, began working with ICASP on some opportunity mapping for NFM in the Upper Rother catchment, which I'll come back to in a little bit more detail shortly. And an application for an NFM officer was put in for local levy funding that would obviously be able to complement the work that the rest of the team were already going to be doing in the catchment through the lottery project. So this was successful and a 2-year pilot post was created, with the idea being to see if there were indeed opportunities for NFM in the catchment and the appetite for them, to start developing relationships with key stakeholders in the area, getting project proposals together, identifying and securing funding for projects both small and large, and start leading NFM volunteer days. So that 2 years will be up in April, unbelievably. So I'm just going to give you an overview now of how we've got on in that time and how we've been meeting those aims and what we've been up to. So we can definitely confirm that there are opportunities for NFM in the Upper Rother catchment. Some of these have been identified through the opportunity mapping with ICASP, and these were based not only on just NFM, but also looked at diffuse pollution risk and landscape connectivity. So the mapping helps to pick out areas where interventions would be able to help meet all 3 of these objectives. So just to give you an idea of what the maps look like, this is an example of the Moss Brook subcatchment, this being the combined opportunity map, so it highlights areas for woodland planting, leaky dams, buffer strips and pond and scrape creation. Hopefully you can make those out on the map there. You don't really need to see the detail, but just the fact that there's obviously different things pointed out in different places. And we have all the underlying data as well for these maps. So they were largely derived from work that Janet Richardson did in SciMap. And I'm not going to go into details on this at the moment because there's very detailed reporting available on the ICASP website with all the methodology and the wider project. So if anybody wants those, you can either navigate there to find them or just let us know and we can point you in the right direction. And then obviously as well, as we've got to know the catchment better, we're discovering more opportunities all the time. And just being a point of contact for NFM in the catchment really means that people are now getting in touch with us about potential projects. And the appetite for NFM is also there. Obviously, we all know there's more and more coming out all the time now about the need for nature-based solutions. And we've been working with various councils, so Derbyshire County Council, Chesterfield Borough Council, the Environment Agency, water companies, local community groups and private landowners too, who are keen to see NFM being delivered. So I think it's fair enough to say that the opportunity appetite for NFM within the Upper Rother catchment is definitely there. So we'll just take a quick look now at some of the projects that we've got on the go. So we'll start in the Moss Valley. This is a subcatchment north of Chesterfield. It's a bit of a problem catchment, particularly because of fine sediment input and downstream flood risk. My colleague Matt, in particular, has been doing a lot of work in the Moss Valley. I've been working with the Moss Valley Wildlife Group, who were actually the original inspiration for the lottery project. And through two of their volunteers, we were put in touch with Heather Hunt, who owns a 12-hectare woodland at the top of the catchment, shown there in red. And she is managing this to enhance biodiversity at the same time as restoring it as a working woodland with opportunities for education and nature connection. Heather was very keen to find out whether there would be opportunities to incorporate NFM into her management plan for the woods, and as it turns out there was. So there are 2 tributaries to the Moss running through the woods, as well as plenty of other little gullies and overland flows. And we had our first NFM volunteer day at Heather's back in February 2020. It was a brilliant day with about 20 volunteers. It's probably the last time I was in a group of that many people. Consent hadn't quite come through for leaky dams yet, so we spent most of the time putting together some spiling in this overland flow, which you can see in the top right hand picture there. And did some gully stuffing and moved some of the bigger timbers around ready for getting the leaky dams in once the consent came through. And we had plans to make this a monthly volunteer day, but obviously you all know what happened then. So it wasn't until October before we finally got back out to Heather's. And we managed a COVID secure volunteer day. So there was just 6 of us out trying to keep risks to a minimum, and we managed another again in December, early December. We got 3 leaky dams in, which was really exciting to finally get them in and reinforce a natural dam as well. And these have been activating in high flows as hoped, so here is a video of one of them in action, if hopefully I can get it to work. There we go. So this was just before Christmas. We had quite a deluge of rain, and that was the first time we managed to catch the dams in action. So yeah, you can see the water backing up there behind them, and yeah, we've got more footage since of them activating again. So we as a trust decided that we weren't going to continue with group volunteer days during the lockdowns, but Heather's been running COVID secure days with her volunteers throughout. Again, with 6 people maximum, and really keeping risks to a minimum. And during this latest lockdown, they were really keen to keep up the NFM efforts. So they have been putting in some more spiling and some other small scale interventions. And actually, I think it's been a really positive thing, as it's given them the confidence to kind of go out and identify areas where they think interventions need to go in and just cracking on with it. So that's been great. And we're hoping to start the leaky dam volunteer days again in April. So just keeping fingers crossed at the moment that those can all go ahead and get more of those leaky dams in. We've also got a site visit lined up with the Sheffield and Rother Wildlife Trust and the Woodland Trust, who both own adjacent woodlands to Heather's. So they've got 2 reserves up there. So we're going to have a look at what other NFM opportunities there might be on their land to really kind of have a crack at addressing flood risk right at the top of the catchment, which would be really, really good to get that in. So moving on to a very different type of project we've been doing, which is working on the development of an NFM scheme for a country park upstream of Chesterfield this time. So this is owned and managed by Derbyshire County Council. It's about 3 miles southeast-ish of Chesterfield. It was a former colliery and was also used for wastewater treatment for the nearby Avenue Coke Works. but it's now been transformed into a country park, though there is still one area which is closed off to the public because of contamination issues. The park is now largely rough grassland with areas of mixed deciduous woodland, and there's 2 ponds as well. The stream leaving the site joins the Callow Brook and then the River Rother in central Chesterfield, which is an area of high flood risk. And the park was actually identified before I was in place as a potentially good place for holding back flows that contribute to this area of flood risk downstream. And it was identified in the ICASP opportunity mapping as well. It was originally hoped that we might be able to daylight a culvert running under the park, but actually it turns out it's really, really quite deep, so it just wasn't feasible. So instead we've come up with a scheme that builds on where the park is already holding water to help increase that capacity and slow flows into the brook. So this is an overview of the scheme. So hopefully you can see there's 4 key zones of potential works, and these consist of various interventions including low earth bunds, timber and rock leaky dams, all aiming to just hold back water, creating wet grassland and temporary storage pools. We've done some initial feasibility works which included a soil survey and analysis, as there was really very little information about the capping material that was used on the park, so we didn't know much about it at all. So the surveys were really useful, as we now know that there's not enough clay on site to line some of the features we hope to create, so we'll be needing to import that. We were also obviously really worried about contamination, but it turns out that for the most part there's no risk. There was one small area identified which we'll now be avoiding as a result, but the rest of the plans can go ahead. And yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's been a really useful learning process, this project, as we had originally thought it would be relatively straightforward, working with the council, who were very supportive of the project. It was on council-owned land, but it's been a surprisingly long process so far, complicated by various things such as the countryside team potentially moving to a private system, PERDA, confusion over whether full planning permission is required or if it came under permitted development, and obviously COVID. So things have been progressing slowly, but they are progressing. And we're now at a point of going through a 2-stage approval process, with a report being considered tomorrow at Cabinet meeting, that if given the go-ahead means we can get the full planning permission in, public consultation done, get the contractors arranged and the designs finalised, ready to go to Cabinet again for final sign-off. And we're told there's a lot of support for this, so we are hopeful, and fingers crossed we'll be able to really get cracking with this very soon. Another aspect of our work is obviously working with farmers. So we were new to this part of the catchment, so we didn't really have many connections to landowners in the area, and the team hadn't really worked with farmers in the past, so this is something that we've been building on in the Upper Rother projects. We started working with farmers in Grassmoor and Hasland areas of Chesterfield, which is where we'll be heading on the virtual site visit, so I won't go into that in too much detail now. We're also in the very early stages of what will hopefully be a great opportunity in Renshaw. So working with landowners upstream of a relatively new estate which flooded during the November 2019 floods. And again, seems like there is a lot of potential for holding back water upstream of that flood risk area. And we're also hoping to work with Natural England's catchment sensitive farming advisor for the Moss Valley, so that same catchment where we're doing the woodland work. So yeah, hopefully working more with farmers in that area too. So finally, going forwards, as I mentioned, my funding was originally for 2 years and was a pilot to determine if there were opportunities for NFM in the Upper Rother. We feel that this is very much the case, and we made another application to the local levy for a further 3 years to be able to continue and expand on the work that we've done so far. This was successful, so we've got a busy 3 years ahead, and we've had a 3-year project extension taking us through to 2024, so that's really exciting as well. We've just recently got the go-ahead for a bolt-on project as well to our original opportunity mapping work with ICASP, which will involve some more detailed modelling in 3 sub-catchments. And this time we'll be quantifying the impact of different intervention types. So we weren't actually quantifying anything before, it was just kind of where might be good to work. And it will also include soil management this time, which wasn't in the original project. And the ICAS work will also help us produce a strategic vision of the scale of interventions required to produce, say, a 5% reduction in flood risk. So I think that'll be a really useful vision to help us work towards. So again, we're looking forward to getting that underway.